Houston, with your first book, Make Your Story Really Stinkin' Big, is this sort of an entrepreneurial view of storytelling, or do you also cover craft and technique?
Both. I think that you need to approach storytelling from an entrepreneurial mindset, just so that you can, as a writer and a producer and a creator, you can have more, you can be empowered more, rather than I'm going to write something and then I'm going to push it out and now I'm at the mercy of the entertainment gods to do whatever they want with my stuff. If you approach it from an entrepreneurial mindset, you can now have more opportunity to take control of your work. But here's the trick, is that if you don't approach everything you do with craft and technique, then your products won't be good. And so in a transmedia business model, we have a diversified product line of not just the film, but a film plus this, plus this, plus this, that all work together for one amazing experience. If you don't perfect your craft and technique for all of them, then all of a sudden nothing's going to work. And it doesn't matter how good your business model is if your stories aren't good and people don't care about them and people don't engage with your characters, and if your products aren't good, your business isn't good. And so it's an interesting balance of understanding the entrepreneurial model and then being able to harness the craft and technique for the individual products within that model. That's the sweet spot of how to make the whole thing work. Because a lot of people say, well, you know what, do you think every movie needs transmedia? Do you think can't you just leave room for a film that doesn't need it? Because, you know, did Hemingway really need to franchise Old Man and the Sea? Does Moonlight really need transmedia extensions? And because typically any offshoot that you have of an original work isn't as good as the original. And if you have sort of the companion this and the spin-off this and the tie-in this, sometimes they're just not as good. And they actually can diminish the original work because you surrounded it with just crap. And I can't argue that necessarily, that doesn't happen, because it does. This is why the creators need to approach the transmedia model and every touch point of that model with the craft and the technique, and to make sure that everything is great. Because if you tell me that not everything needs, Manchester by the Sea, like, does that really need, a first-person shooter that goes along with it? Well, maybe not a first-person shooter, but maybe there is a book of poetry that goes along with it. Maybe there's a novel that goes along with it. Maybe there's a companion album, different than the soundtrack, an album that tells a story from another character's perspective that adds to the story in a really interesting way. Maybe things that fit the brand. Maybe it could use that, because what you're telling me when you say not everything needs transmedia, this is what you're really telling me. You're telling me that audience doesn't need more of your story. And you're also telling me that your investors don't need any more money. And neither one of those things should be true. The highest compliment for an artist, for a filmmaker, is for an audience to say, I love what you did and I want more of it. It's the highest compliment you can ever receive. Not just it was great and I want more. It's the highest compliment you can get. And so for you as a filmmaker, you have to try to figure out, how do I give them more? How do I give them more? How do I continue to cultivate and engage my fan base? But it's too expensive to be able to do movies all the time. So now we have to look at the rest of our toolkit. I mean, imagine going to a restaurant and you have the most amazing entree you've ever had in your life-changing meal. And you call the waiter over and you say, I love this, I'm still hungry, it was the greatest meal I ever had, I want to order something else off the menu. And they say, absolutely not. And you say, well, that's kind of weird because I'm still hungry, I want more. Can I order maybe a dessert? Nope. Can I order an appetizer? Absolutely not. Well, why? Because I have money in my pocket that I want to give you because I love the first meal so much. Well, the chef feels that if he gives you anything else, it could diminish the experience of the first. So the chef thinks you need to be happy with this one thing, right? Now, it doesn't make sense in a consumer arena to have that conversation. But if we now port that back over into entertainment, that's the conversation we're having. You're telling me that this audience member that says, I love the first thing, I want more, then you're telling me, you know what? Me, the chef, the filmmaker, I don't feel like you should have anything else. I think because it could diminish the experience of the first, so you just need to be happy. That's not a way to build a brand. It's not a way to build a business. It's not a way to build an audience base. I would never go back to that restaurant. But here's how, if I somehow convinced them to bring me another dish, and then there was a hair in it, or a fingernail in it, or something awful, then maybe it would diminish the experience of the first. And that's what we've all experienced in multimedia franchises, even some transmedia franchises, where the creators create the first thing, and then for all the other stuff, they leave it to other people. They license it out through a license model. They just and all those other things aren't approached with the same passion, technique, and care that the original was. And then it does diminish the value of the first. So to be able to take care of this, to take advantage of this model, now the creator needs to have this mindset from the beginning, so that they can now approach those other things with the same technique and the same craft. And now when they get the second dish, and they get the third dish and the fourth dish, they're just as good, if not better, than the original. And then the experience is actually enhanced rather than diminished. So, for example, when Quentin Tarantino did Django Unchained, there was a multimedia comic book that was produced, that was Django the comic book. It was the same story in both places, and it wasn't very good. And people were complaining about it, and it was just very, very poorly put together. Well, later, Quentin Tarantino released the official sequel to Django Unchained. So the official sequel to Django Unchained isn't a movie, it's actually a comic book. The story was created by Quentin Tarantino himself, and it's called Django/Zorro. So it's a Zorro Django crossover. That's the official sequel to the movie Django Unchained. But the story, it's a new story. So it continues the story of Django, but the story was created and cultivated and designed by Quentin Tarantino. And then he just had comic book people put it together, because he doesn't know comic books. But he worked with the team and made sure that the craft, the passion, and the technique that he put into the original film was then put into this transmediated extension. And then all of a sudden, where the fans hated the first comic book, they loved the second comic book, because not only was it new story, but it was new story that was crafted by the creator in the same way he crafted the original. So that's a very long way to answer the question, but it's an intersection of both. It's an entrepreneurial mindset for the business model, and then how you execute within that business model is with craft and technique at every single touch point to work together. That, I think, is the sweet spot.